This is Doug Stout. It is March 20th, 2014. I'm here with Don Jakeway. Don, where were you born?
I was born January the 16th, 1923.
Were you born in Alexandria?
I was born in Johnstown.
Johnstown. Okay.
Out here in the country on Old Miller Road.
Right. And then when did you enlist?
That was on November the 28th, 1942.
And then you got out?
I got out August the 23rd, 1945 from medical discharge from Memphis General Hospital. Yeah.
And you were in the Army?
Well, it was the Army Airborne. Now, to me, the Airborne was always different from just the Army, but we were the Army Airborne. At that time, they were just originating and creating the airborne forces. They took the 82nd Division, which was the division that Sergeant York was in. They put the airborne patch over the top of it. I don't have them on my bet, but they put the airborne patch over the top of it and made it the 82nd Airborne. That was formed in 1941 in Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. Omar Bradley was the first commanding general of our division. General Browning had come over from England, and they were going to see Bradley was going to make an armor unit out of the 82nd Airborne, of the 82nd. Mm-hmm. So Browning talked him into making a parachute division, and that's what they done. So they called it the 82nd Airborne Division, and they started recruiting airborne troopers in 1942.
And so you volunteered to be airborne?
Only way you could get in. You
Okay.
couldn't be drafted, you couldn't be married, you couldn't wear glasses, you had to be in physical. It took, and this is in the books, in the records, in history, it took over 2,500 recruits to make 130 paratroopers.
Wow.
That's how strict they were.
So what made you want to jump out of a plane?
Well, there was two things about it. I lived on a farm. We were a poor family. My dad worked for $1 a day. We lived on a little farm, and there was a story to this. I played football for Johnstown, 39, 40, 41. In 1941, I became the outstanding backfield player in the state for Paul Potter at Croton. It made him upset because he was a good ball player. We beat that team 6-0, but they won the league championship because when we played Granville, we had a 0-0 tie and we lost the championship to them.
Wow.
Well, when they had the honors given out, and that was Sheriff Paul Howard who was giving out these awards, I won that award and made him upset. So we used to come in the ice cream parlor here in Johnstown. One day he came in and says, "Okay, tough guy, how about joining? I got 2 applications to the paratroopers. How about joining them?" I didn't have any idea what a paratrooper was, and I said, "Sure." Now we're 18 years old, just out of high school. So we went over to Columbus to Fort Hays and enlisted. Paul Potter and I did. And his ID number was 15339659, and mine was the next one, 60. And the reason that we got attracted to that, because if you become a paratrooper, you made $50 more than the regular infantry.
Okay.
So money was a factor.
Right.
But when I found out what we were going to do, we were concerned about it. We didn't know what was going on. But there were 9 of us left Fort Hays, and on the way down to Camp Toccoa, Georgia, where they were beginning to assemble airborne recruits. And by the time that we got down, we stopped in camps, like different camps on the way down, and they checked you for color blindness and too many teeth, not enough teeth, and eyeglasses and all this stuff. When we got to Camp Toccoa, Georgia, it was only Paul Potter and I of the 9.
Wow.
The rest were washed out. When we got to Camp Toccoa, Georgia, that's where they got the mountain Cherokee. That was one of the roughest obstacle courses and roughest ordeals that go through any human body, really. You had to put a weighted pack on your shoulder, run up this mountain, touch the stone at Curragh Key, and come all the way back down again in a certain amount of time. If you didn't make it, they washed you out. And that's where we lost so many recruits. They just couldn't do it. Well, fortunately for me and Paul, we were both football players, and I used to, after practice and after games and basketball and baseball, I would jog 3.5 miles home after practice. Nope, I didn't have any communication.
Right.
And so I was in pretty good shape, and I was able to make it. I don't want to go rambling. Okay.
You're fine.
Okay, but in any case, we had to be one of the first groups that ever came into Camp Toccoa, Georgia. And that was, like, say, in November of 1942. There was no bedclothes on the bunks. There was mud, red mud, everywhere, mud in the barracks and everything. So we just getting in there.
Right.
We stayed there only about 3 or 4 weeks, and the ones that didn't get washed out, we were kind of shuffled into an area, and we were shipped to Camp Blanding, Florida, and where we took our basic to become part of the 508 Parachute Infantry Regiment.
Is that when you did your first jump?
No,
Okay.
that's only basic.
Okay.
That's where we did the force marches and the field exercises, learning how to do the bayonet and the firing squads and the judo, they called it then, karate and stuff. We learned that. I still know some of it.
That's good.
And so we were there 13 weeks. And after 13 weeks, then we were shipped to Fort Benning, Georgia. We had to make 5 parachute jumps to qualify as a paratrooper.
You remember how you felt your first jump?
The first jump didn't bother me. I hate to say that, but I thought about it. But 2 or 3 of us guys, I got a picture of us. We were trying to get it off our mind. We were jumping up against one another. The second jump, you got to thinking a little bit more about it. And of all the jumps I've made, the 5th one was the hardest one I ever had to make. Almost didn't go. Because if you jump, you became a paratrooper. You got your wings, you got your boots, you got a furlough home. And I'm thinking about all this. But when they said stand up and hook up, man, I did it, and I got out. Now, instead of going home for furlough, Doug, I took demolition school, working with high explosives. I took compass reading, airplane identification, and stayed there for 3 or 4 weeks doing this training, because I wanted to learn everything I could if I was going to be in combat.
Yeah.
And then I got a furlough home, and that was the only time in 3 years that I ever had a furlough. I went home, and people didn't even know, anything was going on. It wasn't no big deal. There was nothing to do, and it just, so you were a soldier, so what, And then I went back to Camp McCall, North Carolina, where we had assembled, and that's where we did our advanced training. We trained in Okefenokee Swamp and Chattahoochee River area first. Then we trained in the swamps of Tennessee and South Carolina, and thinking we were going to go to Japan. And I told the kids yesterday, I'm one of those nervous guys. I got to be doing something all the time. I got to. I'm still that way. And I wrote 2 paragraphs of a song. I didn't know whether you want me to.
Sure.
I'm not a singer, but I'll sing.
Fine.
But I kind of, because what is happening with this thing, I've been talking about this, and it was put on the internet by a friend of mine. They got 4,000 hits in one day.
I'll bet.
Wanting that.
Right.
So I'm going to tell you, it was raining, and we was thinking we was going to Japan or in the Pacific. We were in the swamps. It was raining like crazy, and Coltrane and I shared shelter halves. That was a tent that he had a half and I had a half. We buttoned it together, and that's what we slept in. When I got in there, I always carried a little candle. So I lit this candle. I got my pencil out, and I was just messing around. I said, "Oh, let me see what I can do here." So this is the way it goes, Doug. You can use it or you can forget it. It goes like this. Far across the Pacific to the island of Japan, We got a score to settle and the time is now at hand. We're gonna send a pair of troops to sail across the sea to make this country safe for those who love democracy. Hear the airplane motors humming, hear the angry bullets whine. We're gonna send a pair of troops to slaughter all the swine. Then know their days are numbered when the paratroops round them fall. We'll send this message to them with the troopers from McCall. And it took me all night to do that.
That's great.
I got a buddy that runs around with me and he says, I'm going to go with you, Jake, and sing, but if you start singing, I'm leaving the room.
Now, was Potter still with you at this time? I mean,
Yeah.
He's still
Now,
there
we qualified from Decorah, went to Blanding, and they put Paul in headquarters 3rd Battalion and put me in H Company. They wouldn't leave us going together. But we were right across the company streets from one another, you know.
Yeah.
So, actually, Paul and I palled around a lot, but I was an opposite type of guy. When I was raised up, my dad was the finest man you ever met till he started drinking and he got mean. And I saw this. And I never drank. And I never smoked. So when we go into town together, he'd go to the bar. I go to the dance hall. And I just got to the place where he's getting drunk, he wanted to be fighting and stuff like that. And I said, it's not going to work that way.
Right.
So I know one night I was in the pickup area waiting to get on the truck to come back, and I heard this moaning and groaning on in the shrubs. I went over there and it was Paul. He'd been drunk and he didn't know where he was, and I got him unloaded on the truck, took him back into camp, got him into his bunk in the 3rd Battalion headquarters company. Just made reveille, and I never went out with him again after that.
Yeah.
Although we see one another once in a while, you know, and we were still friends.
Right.
That's his life, and I had mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then when did you know you were going to Europe instead of Japan?
Well, this is the way it worked. When we got back to Camp McCall, we took maneuvers and went to Camp Force, Tennessee. My 3rd platoon that I was in won the proficiency contest of all the activities that we done. Mm-hmm. And our prize, believe it or not, we were all excited thinking we were going to get a pass to Washington, D.C. or something. Our prize was to fly over the Smokies, make an exhibition jump in Camp Force, Tennessee. And my guys were teed off, you know, they were really upset. So what the heck kind of a prize is that? So we went over we flew the mountain, made our jumps, and we made this jump on record at 385 feet. Took 128 feet for the chute to open. We did this, and a bunch of officers sitting in the bleachers watching us. We stayed there about 2 or 3 weeks, and that's where they had the Air Force had their B-24s, B-25s, one of the two, and that's where they were training. Well, they would just coax us guys to get us in them planes. And if you ever flew in one of them things, you understand why we didn't want in them.
Yeah.
They had a tunnel from the pilot back through like this, and they'd get the paratroopers in there. Then they'd do this stuff, you know. Man, we were just all over the place, and I said, I want no part of that crap. And anyway, when we decided to come back to Camp McCall, they put us on the train, and I'm going to tell you this story, and you can use it or you can eliminate it. But on the way back, it was hot. The train was dirty. We were all smoke coming back. It was in the windows were open. We were dirty, and we had to pull off onto a side track to let a passenger train go by. And while I was there, I looked out, and there were some little colored children playing around the tracks and over the ties and things. And I said, hey, why don't you come over here? And this young guy came over, looked like he's about 10, 12 years old. I said, is there any place where you can get some ice cream? He said, yes, sir. I said, if I give you $1, will you get me some ice cream? He said, yes, sir. That's all he said. I gave him $1. The guys behind me said, are you nuts? $1 was a lot of money. You know, we got When we got promoted to PFC, we only got $1 more a month. But anyway, I said, well, you try to get me some ice cream. Well, he took off, and I could see him yet running down this dirt road. And it must have been about 10, 15 minutes. And I just figured I'd never see him again, you know. Pretty soon I was looking out the window, and here he comes running back. Run up to this window, and he had a pint of vanilla ice cream. 50-cent piece in his hand, and he handed me the change, and handed me the ice cream, and I gave him the 50 cents, and his eyes went about this big around. And the last I seen him, and he was after the raising desk going back up that road, hanging on to that 50 cents. And the guy says, well, come on, Jake, share your ice cream. I said, you guys want ice cream, get your own. But you know, that taught me a lesson. And I've never discriminated against anybody. That kid didn't have to come back. Just to go to show you, I had faith that he would do it, and he did it. And from then on, and I've been director of international operations, traveled to 100 different countries, and I don't discriminate against anybody.
Yeah.
That's the way I was raised. I figured as long as they treat me okay,
Right.
then I treat them okay, and I don't have to associate with ones that I don't have to. But I got along with a lot of people that way, and I learned a lesson that day. The train came in, and we left and got back to camp, and we were in there. And then we were making practice jumps, which I think one of those pictures shows in 1943 when we were, right there. We was getting ready to make a practice jump. This was the rigger. He was checking my equipment, and so we made practice jumps. Learned how to pack our equipment bundles with machine guns and ammunition and stuff that we couldn't carry.
Right.
And we still thought we were going to the Pacific. We didn't know for sure. And we took off and got into Camp Shanks, New York, in December '43. And they were going to give us a pass to town. Some of the guys that took off, and all at once the guy goes and says, everybody from the 508 back to the barracks. You're on guard duty. Everybody took off running, including me. So I went on into New York City, and one of the highlights of that was I went to Jack Dempsey's restaurant and had him autograph a pair of boxing gloves for me, because I used to box a little bit.
Okay.
So his hands are like this. Unbelievable. He had the biggest hands a man I ever seen. And he signed them little boxing gloves. I think I still got them somewhere. But anyway, then when we got back to camp, said, we got to change all your uniforms, because we were pregnated for moisture and dampness and gas and stuff like that. We got all new uniforms. And then on the 23rd of December '43, we went to Ferris Island, took a Staten Island ferry across, loaded them onto the ships, and headed for Europe. We were on board the USS James Parker, turned out to be the flagship of the convoy, which is the largest convoy at the time that ever crossed the Atlantic. There's over 100 ships in it. That's when the Wolfpack was so active in the ocean, the submarines, the German submarines. And so we had destroyers, we had a small aircraft carrier, and there was about 100 ships. Now there was about 4,000 of us on that ship. Now there was at least 3 or 4 of our ships that was sunk out of the convoy, and from my reports that I had got, we'd also sunk 3 or 4 of their submarines. Anyway, we got in 11 days across the ocean, and the first time we got on that ship, they had me in a hammock, 10 decks down, and I thought, if a torpedo hits this thing, I won't have a chance. So 3 of us went up on deck, took our shelter house with us, and we slept between the smokestacks, stayed on deck only to get down into the galley to try to grab something to eat, like an apple or something, because it was. Anyway, we stayed there, and it was on the morning of the 11th day, we were on the deck, and we heard this woo, woo, train whistle. We had no idea where we were, but I can remember that whistle. I said, man, we're near land somewhere. We pulled into Belfast, Ireland. And from there we went into Port Stewart at Camp Cremor. And we stayed there. Now that would have been in the first part of January. We stayed there till March, but it would get dark till 10 o'clock in the morning. The daylight would be a couple hours. Get dark at 2. We couldn't train. So they shipped us to Edinburgh, Scotland, then to Nottingham, England, right in the middle of Sherwood Forest. And that's where we took our jump training, our field exercises, and we got our passes and things into town. And instead of me going into town, a lot of times I'd go up to the gym. We'd play basketball because I was when we were at Blanding, I did the same thing there. I never took a pass. I sent my money home, and I formed a basketball team. The guys would come up from my company, and we won the regimental championship. Never lost a basketball game until we got into Belfast, Ireland. Played in the tournament there in the finals. We got beat 32-30. I remember it like it was yesterday. Never played anymore after that. So it was an exciting life leading up to that. We played in Londonderry. We played at the air bases. We played at army camps and things. They could. We had 3 guys from Evansville, Indiana. And you know, when we went in, Doug, you couldn't be more than 6'2". That was the height you could be. So the average guy was about like me, about 5'10" or 5'11". And but these guys were 6'2", and could they play basketball? And I was they would call them point guards. I was just a guard. I could bring a ball and pass the ball. And I was fast. And so we did real well. After that day, we got beaten and we never played anymore after that. But after that, in the camp, we still didn't know where we were going to go. In about 3 weeks ahead of this Normandy thing, they moved us into Folkingham and Saltby Air Force fields. Locked us in, had a big fence around it, guard you couldn't get in and you couldn't get out. The only way people could get in there was supplies. They put us in the hangar, and when we got in there, they had this big meeting in the big hangar. Says, we can now tell you that you're going to Normandy. And we didn't know the date just yet, but said you are going to be going to Normandy. So we looked at sand tables to identify landmarks, like when we jumped in Normandy. And my job was a machine gunner. So we got to practice. We didn't really fire a lot into the camp, but we got to practice. Like when I put the tripod down, the assistant gunner come up, put the gun on, and the ammo bearer come up, set the thing down, and they come back and they protected me. So that's what we practiced. We learned these landmarks and stuff like that. Now, on June the 4th, 1944, we were all geared up, ready to go. Just like you see right in front of that book.
Right.
We weighed somewhere around the 325 to 30 pounds with all your weight. In fact, being a demolition man, I had 2 landmines, one on each side, 6 half-pound blocks of TNT. I had composition C2, which is plastic explosive, primacord, blasting caps. I had all this on me. So I could barely get on that plane. As you can see, you could just barely get yourself on the plane. And the crew would have to help you sometime to get on. But anyway, we went that night. We was laying on our bunks thinking, well, we're going to go, and it rained us out. The weather was so bad they didn't go. I woke up the next morning. I'm still laying in my bunk. I said, wow, big deal. Maybe we aren't going to go. Well, then that night, June the 5th, 9 o'clock, we heard the phone ring up in the front part of the hangar we were in, and it was on. So we boarded the planes about 9:45, around 10 o'clock, something like that, off and on, and we took off. Now, before we went, the USA was serving donuts and coffee. Big mistake. Of course, we didn't know. We carried 3 packs of K rations. That's all. We just had 3 packs of K rations. That was what we had to eat. So when we got before we got on, of course, we stuffed ourselves with donuts and coffee, and we took off. And as we're going across the channel, I began to get a little woozy. So I stood up, hooked up in the static line, walked up, stood in the door. And as we're going along, it would be foggy, then it'd be a little cloudy, then it'd be clear. And when it get clear up, you could look down and you could see all these ships going across the channel toward Normandy. Now this is about 10:30 at night, you know. And I stood there in the door, and as long as the air and everything, because the door was open, and I'm hooked up in case I'd fall out. But we started over Guernsey Island, and the Germans held those areas, and the flak started coming up, and it was so thick, Doug. I can't explain it to you. It's like you could walk down on it. I mean, it was, and it shot down some of our planes. And I went back and sat down, and when I did, I left my donuts and coffee in the plane, you know. You could hear the guys yelling, no, all that stuff. I said, and I couldn't help it, because nervous, 19, 20 years old. We think about going along. I'm going to be jumping into Normandy in the dark. I don't know where I'm going to land. The Germans are going to be waiting for us. Can I kill somebody? I never killed more than a rabbit when I was home, you know. But we were told and taught to kill, and we were told to take no prisoners for the first 10 days once we got on the ground. I can remember the orders exactly. Anyway, I went out the door, and we were so scattered. The formation of the planes and the fog and the planes were scattered. We landed in among the British. We landed in among the 101st, and our H Company guys would be over here around Cheptepont, and the other guy would be over here around Peekaville, and I landed in it. And when I jumped about 500 feet, I looked down, and it was just dark, and you could see all this water. They had flooded the Mediterranean River and flooded all this land. Well, I started grabbing my risers and pulling over, and I drifted, and I landed in a tree in a little churchyard. Scared to death. That's when I had this, I don't know if I had it in here or not, just really had it, When we jumped, they give us this clicker. And so I landed in this tree, and I come down at about 8 to 10 feet from the ground. Now we're all buckled up. We didn't have the quick release like the British had. And it was difficult to get out of them because your weapon was underneath it, but you can see how it would be. We had to get that reserve off and messing around. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, here I'm hanging in a tree, and if there's any Germans around, they're going to shoot you.
Right.
So I remembered my training. I cut myself loose and run to the hedgerow, and I pulled this clicker out, and I said, why would I want to sit out there in the dark going like that? Now, if you was a German soldier, would you be a little suspicious?
Yeah, it's not a natural sound.
A metal sound like that will travel 50 yards at night. I mean, in fact, I got a World War II magazine that says this German officer was saying he didn't think that the American intelligence was too smart to have their men sitting out in the dark doing that.
Right. Because
you could hear that sound 100 yards away. So I threw it away. I threw my clicker into the hedgerow. And I don't know whether you want me to continue like this or not, okay? But anyway, Doug, I later went back over there in 2011. There was a little French woman, about 5'2", and I had an interpreter with me, and a big group of people around followed me. I was telling them about this, and she spoke up, and the interpreter said, Mr. Jakeway, he said, this lady said she was 14 years old that night when she looked out the window and seen the parachutes coming down. And she said, at that time, the Germans were in her house and bivouacked in her yard. And if I'd have drifted another 50 yards, I'd have landed right into them.
Wow.
And I would have never been here because they didn't
know
it. So.
Was there any, when you got got yourself out of the tree, were there anybody around you?
I'm going to tell you what happened. It took me 10 days to find my unit. I was by myself for a few days, and I run into some 101st guys, about 6 of them. Then the next day there was about 4 or 5 more. We wound up with about 20 of them, and they were 101st, and they were supposed to be down around Carrington, 60 miles away, but they were where we were, and there was British in among us, because the planes had got scattered and had no radar, and they got scattered, and we had to jump. Well, the guys, they wanted to get out of the planes with all that flak coming. I know at least one plane of our guys was shot down, landed in the ocean, in the channel. They were picked up and made the seaborne invasion. Double duty. But anyway, an experience that I'll never forget as long as I live. I hid in a hedgerow there for about 15 or 20 minutes, and planes were droning over. So, Doug, I had to be in one of the first planes because I never seen anybody. Everybody was jumping beyond me, you know?
Right.
So I had to be in one of the first planes in our formation to drop our people, and the planes were going over, and our orders were to follow the flights of the plane, like when we moved. Well, I sat there in the hedgerow, and finally I started walking down this hedgerow. I looked over to the left, and there was a lane with 2 stone walls on each side, and the planes were kind of still going that way. So I got out of the hedgerow, started down that path, and I heard somebody coming. Pretty good sized group of people. I knew it wasn't ours. So I bailed over this stone wall, which you don't do. You never know what's on the other side. Remember, it's dark now.
Sure.
I slid down this bank right through the freshest cow pile you ever seen. I had cow manure, my boots, and all up my leg, and then my pants, my jumpsuit, had all those things in my pockets and things, you know. And I'm sitting there yakking at myself, and I was really disgusted, but the German patrol looked like they were about almost a platoon size walk by. You could hear them, you know. I've had people say, well, what'd you do? And I said, well, if you get that crap all over, you know, I said, I was so disgusted. I said, I finally got up and I started to go, they was coming this way, so I decided to go back that way. And about that time, I heard this swishing noise, about twice the height of this room here. A big horse glider, which is a British glider, come down over my head, turn like this, and into hedgerows. The hedgerows are about the size of a football field with big hedge trees and things, 50 yards wide, maybe about 100 yards long, varied a little bit. That horse glider come down, hit the ground, and went across, slammed into the hedgerow, and they had an anti-tank gun and a jeep and ammunition and everything. It just went right through and just wiped out everybody on that horse, because I waited, because I was afraid it was going to draw attention. So I finally went over to it, and they're laying everywhere. Being by yourself at that time, I didn't know what I could do. You know, what could I do? I figured the Germans would hear that wreck and my job was try to get back to my outfit. So I left them. I left those guys there. I don't know if any of them was still alive or not, but I remember. And we always was willing to help anybody we can. That's what we were trained for. So I got back. I went down this hedgerow a little further, seen this house. I went up there, and there was about 601st Airborne guys there. So I got together with them. Then there'd be some stragglers would come in, and next thing you know, we had about 20. Well, I was the only 82nd Airborne guy there. So we had combat. They put us out on recon and combat patrols, and I was always leading the dadburn things. Well, in the course of doing that, one of my first experiences was about the fourth day. I'm laying beside this hedgerow watching these Germans moving around in this ravine. And as I'm laying there, I had to have my M1 up like this because my machine gun's in the equipment bundle. I didn't know where it was. And I'm laying there with my M1 because I didn't jump with a Thompson. This is not me.
Okay.
I jumped with an M1. Anyway, or a folding stock carbine. And anyway, I was watching these Germans, and I had my hand like that, and a bullet hit between my head and my elbow. And I said, from behind me. So I jumped over this hedgerow into this, jumped down in this ditch. And the heck, I got out of there. Eventually I snuck my way back out and got back into my unit. So meanwhile, it was on the 10th day, we kept going toward the firing, and the guys, we could ask people about the 82nd, no one would know if we ever run into anybody. We wound up with about 30, 40, 101st guys. I must have landed right in among them. Mm-hmm. And finally, on the 10th day, I walked up through this little hedgerow, up into this little apple orchard, and there was Lou Zebra from my company. First thing he said, "Where you been goofing off, you know?" He was a character. And I finally got back to my outfit. The next day, we crossed the Mediterranean in little boats, started down through this orchard, and the Germans opened up on us, started firing, and we had fixed our bayonets, and we were running down through there firing, they were firing. And I had, meanwhile, I'd gotten my machine gun back, because they'd had one there. And we stopped at this little hill, and there was a big chateau down here, and the Germans were firing from there. Well, we stopped here, dug in, and got my machine gun set up, and we had a battle there for about an hour or so. We were shooting down and around the chateau. Anything we see anybody moving, our mortars crew would set up behind us. They were going in, and all at once got real quiet. And right in front of my machine gun, I'm sitting there. Right in front of my machine gun, a German medic got up, picked up a wounded German, put him on his shoulder, turned his back, and started walking back towards the chateau. And I yelled, I said, "Hold your fire," because you know, not a shoot a medic. Right. We were paratroopers, but we weren't murderers either. But this guy went down, climbed over the wall, and it was still quiet. And all at once we heard this noise. Doug, coming up the road was 61 Germans that came in and surrendered to us. Now they weren't German, they were Estonians, Lithuanians. They were conscripted into the army, they were Wehrmacht. And we'd have killed that medic. You know, if we'd have shot that medic, they would have never come up that road. Right. Well, we had orders to not take any prisoners. Well, what are you going to do? You're not going to shoot 61 people. So we put 2 guys in front, 2 in the side, 2 in the back. We took them one back and turned them over to battalion CP, the command post, going over there, and they put them in a barn. Had a door in the front, one in the back. So they had 2 guys in the back, 2 guys in the front, and they had them in the barn. I don't know what happened to them after that. So Normandy was very exciting. Paul Potter, who was with me, we were crossing an intersection on July the 3rd, and the mortar came in, our 88 came in, and he got seriously wounded, and that was his trip home. He didn't get killed, but he got home. But on the 4th of July, was the next day, they got orders at La Haye de Puy. We were to attack this hill. They called it Hill 95. We were to attack this hill and to do it in our platoon formation. We had the 508 here, right in the middle. The 505 was to our right, and the 507 was to our left. So we were attacking this hill, and it was a big hill this time. Hill 30 was just a little elevated mound, really. But this was a hill. When we got into the field, we realized, after we got into it just a little bit, that the field was mined. There was a Hitler Youth Division sitting up on the hill. They opened up on us with 88s and mortar, machine gun fire, rifle fire. And in my squad that I was in, they killed Deloach and Belair and Tanner, missed me, killed Vachon, killed Medford, killed 7 of my guys that was in my squad. How they didn't kill me, I don't know. To this day, I don't know why, what happened. So I run, instead of running back, or keep them going forward. I run over here and got into a hedgerow, and I could see this machine gun firing at about 150 yards down into the field. And in the M1, you can get, there's 8 in the clip, and you can put one in the chamber, so you get 9 rounds. So I fired all 9 rounds right into that machine gun nest, just one right after the other. You could pull the trigger on an M1, you can pull it one at a time or as fast as you wanted to.
Okay.
That was a nice thing about that unit, that gun, rifle. And after I fired and emptied that, it got deathly quiet. There wasn't a bird, there wasn't no more firing. I didn't hear nobody yelling, I didn't hear nothing, but I could see these guys laying around, but Deloach had been hit by a machine gun, his legs were all tore up. And I'm laying in this hedgerow. What am I going to do? So I put a new clip in, and I looked behind me, and there was about 20 feet away, there was this great big dike. It was about 20 feet up, across and down. And I knew I had to get over that. So it took all the courage I could mount to jump up, make a run for it, and got scrambled over that mound and got back up to the hill to where we started from. But we then went from there, Puy, we went Bellefontaine, we went to Preto, we went to Picaville, and on July the 13th, which is 37 days, we wound up in Lasay, which was on the right side. This was the peninsula, this was St. Lo, this was the beaches. We started in here, we went across this way and down this way to keep the Germans away from the beaches. And we stopped in Lasay after our 37 days, and they moved us back into Nottingham. They took us. And of the group we had, there was 130 in our unit. There's 39 of us that went back. Meanwhile, still wearing that same uniform. We never took a shower. We tried to clean up the best we can. We'd get water out of the little streams or the creeks and things, put Airborne tablets in it and purify it. Terrible stuff. But I'd take a little bit and I'd wash my mess kit I had, because a lot of times what I did, I hid in a cellar or something, I'd find a carrot, a potato, something, and believe it or not, long story short, the guys from New York didn't know what a bouillon cube was. Bouillon cubes was in our K rations, but I did. So I traded my cigarettes because I didn't smoke, and I changed my hardtack candy and my coffee, and I got these bouillon cubes. So what I would do, I'd take my composition C2, plastic explosive pinch off one by the size of a big marble, light that, put water in my helmet, light that, heat that up, and it was just like a blowtorch. And I'd put my bouillon cubes in there and put some carrots and things and around. And I know this one time, the guy said, "Hey, Sarge, you smell that?" And I said, "Smell what?" "Somebody's cooking food somewhere. You smell that?" And I said, "No, I don't smell that." After the war, I was telling those guys from New York what the bouillon cubes was, and they'd give me what for, because I wouldn't tell them. But anyway, we got back to England and got back in there on, let's see, we left there on the 13th. We were back in there on about the 14th, and we had what we call a long pass, like 4 or 5 days. They gave us a pass to go out. And when I got back that day, I walked in the tent and I'm a mess. I'm dirty. I'm about to look terrible. Sitting on the bunk across from me was this guy, young guy sitting there. Never said a word. I didn't say a word. I was tired. I sat down. This is my squad tent. I was the only one that got back from that squad tent. So there's 8 in it. I lost 7 of my men. Anyway, sat there for a while. I said, "How you doing?" He says, "I'm doing fine. I'm doing all right." And I looked at him and I said, "You sure look familiar. I've seen you somewhere before." He says, you have? And I said, where are you from? He says, Newark, Ohio. And I live in Johnston.
Right.
His name was Bill Tracy. He had a Tracy Sporting Goods store there years ago.
Okay.
When I went to high school, Webster liked me, and he'd send me down to buy baseballs or equipment for their. I'd get down there, and Bill was working for his dad. That's where I knew him from. Well, we partnered up after that. After we got, because he was a replacement that had come in, you know. So we partied up and partnered up together. We got caught a few times sneaking back into camp, and had a lot of funny stories there, but I won't go into that part. But anyway, we didn't anymore get settled down. We started our training, and through August. Then on September the 17th, we loaded our C-47s and took off for Holland. And on the way over, I just automatically went up and stood in the door. Now this was in the daytime, sunshiny as Sunday. I stood in the door, and you see these people down there waving these yellow banners in Holland. So we were about 100 miles behind the German lines, because we went all the way up into St. Miraglise, we went up all the way into Nijmegen, the Beek area. So going through, and Doug, the only plane that was shot down in the 3rd Battalion in that division was the one I was in. Jim Belcher was in the 2nd Battalion, and after the war, he drew this, showing this 3rd Battalion coming in, the plane was on fire, right engine was on fire, and I knew immediately that was the plane I was in, because Father Kenny was in it, and I've got the documents at home, like from our Stars and Stripes and the Red Devil magazine, telling about our plane being shot down, and I was in it with Bill Tracy and all of us got out except the crew sergeant. He jumped with a flak suit over his parachute, and of course he got killed, and the plane went on down, glided down, and landed in Werliner in Germany and crashed. And after the war was over, there was a guy named Jan Boss from Holland saying, he was a historian, he said there was no plane shot down in the 3rd Battalion of the 508. And I cut out the clippings and things and told him the story and sent it over to him, and never heard from him since. Wow. But anyway, that's what I led up. When we landed there on the 17th, we fought on the 18th and 19th and the 20th, and then we got up there to this place. We captured a big division in Bergendal, the Green Hotel. We captured the hotel. It was a German division headquarters. We drove them out. Then on the next day, on the 21st, I should have said, we didn't know those people were in this house. Mm-hmm. Knew nothing about them. Right. I learned all this afterwards, although I remember where Rosa, this is Holverman, he was actually killed in the group behind him, and these guys had carried him up the door to see if they had a blanket or something, because he was wounded, and he died there in the doorway. And that's Bert and his sister standing in the door. So that's when we drove these Germans out of there, liberated this German family, and the next day is when I got back up there is when I got wounded, and I got shipped back to tell you a story about that. After the man was killed beneath me, they took me to the first aid station, and they worked on me, they patched me up. And during the fighting there, even when the artillery was coming in, we were still having some fighting going on. A sniper or somebody had shot, and the bullet went right through my non-com stripe, and part of that bullet's in my head now. Part of it. Mm-hmm. And they took me back to the first aid station, and they did some work on me, and they moved me on out, and on the way out they stopped at another field hospital, and I can remember this nurse and a doctor were working on me. They put me out, and they was cleaning up. My face was a mess, my back, I still got little pieces of metal coming out of me. And anyway, they operated on me when I got done, they brought me back, laid me in this tent, laying on a cot. A German Messerschmitt 109 came over, strafed the hospital. That was about 15 minutes after I was on that table, and it killed that doctor and that nurse at the very table that I had just been on 15 minutes before.
They strafed a hospital?
They strafed the hospital. Strafed the hospital. Had the big Red Cross things out in the yard. He still strafed them. Everybody was diving under their bunks and everything, and I'll never forget, this doctor come up, and I'm just laying there, nothing I could do. I'm just laying on the cot. And he was crying, tears running. He says, there you are laying there, and we're hiding under benches and tables and whatever was in there. And I said, if I was you, I'd have done the same thing, you know, if I could have. Right. But he strafed this hospital, killed that doctor and that nurse at that very table he just operated on me on. That was just some of the times where I don't know why I'm here, why I'm not over there sleeping with the rest of the guys I got killed.
Now, did Tracy make it through Market Garden?
Well, what he did, we were in the Beak area. Beak sat at the foot of this hill. We were Bergendahl. Here's a big hill. Here's Beak. Well, the Germans would had it. We'd go down. We'd drive the Germans out of Beak, then get the heck out of there, because what they did, they had these areas spotted for their artillery. So as soon as you'd leave, they'd just blow the heck out of those areas. So on the fourth day, our commander taught us, we're not coming back this time. Because we get down, Germans would come back in. We get down, Germans come back. The fourth day, we went right through and chased them right out of there into Persinger and out into the flats. And then I wasn't there any longer after that. So I don't know. From there on, I did get back, spent from September to December in the hospital. And on the 15th of December of 1944, they shipped me back to Reims, France, give me my squad back. I was a squad leader. To give my squad back, had new men. And that was on the 16th. And on that very day, the Germans started the Battle of the Bulge. The Panzer units broke through the American lines. And on the 18th then, the 82nd, our group, I got my squad, we had to clean our equipment that was being repaired and had claws. I mean, we would clean it, and all we had is our jumpsuits and our jacket. And being an old farm kid, I had an extra shirt and an extra pair of pants on underneath because I didn't know what to expect, you know. And anyway, they let us on these cattle trucks, and what they were big long cattle trucks like this, we had to stand up. And they took off for Werbermont. We left Reims. The 101st was down here at Swipes. They come in, got in a convoy behind us. We were going toward Werbermont. A Panzer division cut the convoy in two. The 101st circled and went into Bastogne. And during the Battle of the Bulge, the 101st fought in the Battle of the Bulge around the Bastogne area. They were never anywhere else except the Bastogne area. Now, we went on up to Werbermont, an hour after we got there, we were out fighting. And we fought 3rd Mont Ridge, the Mur, Stavelot, and fought all these areas. Meanwhile, to try to keep the Germans away from Bastogne. That's what our orders were, I guess. And I fought in there from the 18th of December, and we were never allowed to be inside of a building. I never had a hot shower from the 18th to January the 31st. We were not allowed in the building. We lived in foxholes in the ground. We could eat, and we never got a hot meal. The supplies would come in and drop the K rations in. And we never had the C rations, we never had the 10 and 1s, but we had K rations. And on the 30th, I'm going to wind this thing up, but on the 30th of December, or January, we had a firefight with the Germans, and I pulled my squad that I had back into the brush. Snow 23 below zero. The snow was about 2 or 3 feet deep, and the sniper shot 2 of my men. And I looked over at Charlie Martin. I said, "Charlie, we're going out and get that sniper. I'm sick of this." He said, "We're not allowed to do that." He says, "Well, I'm a staff sergeant now, and you're a private. You're going with me. We're going out and see if we can find that sniper." So we started walking out through the snow, very carefully, moving along real slow. And all at once, I just froze in my track. I just knew something was wrong. I don't know what it was. I had a little chill running down my spine, and I went, "Yeah, what's going on?" And I looked over, and no farther than maybe a little farther than the corner of this room, lay that sniper, pointing his Mauser rifle right at me. And all he had to done was pull the trigger. He could have killed me. So all I did, I just real slow, not real quick, but real slow, I just went, "Waffendiddling on the home." Threw down your weapon, put up your hands. And 2 of them jumped up. 2 snipers in snow capes. I don't know whether, since I spoke in German, whether that fooled them or what happened, but he never shot.
My goodness.
So we captured these 2 guys, took them back to the battalion CP, turned them over. We were still relaxed. Our crew was still relaxed back in the bush. And that night, I dug the foxhole. I'm in the foxhole, and I get up the next morning, and I'm shaking all over like this. I just knew something was going to happen to me. I had that feeling again. I'm shaking. I couldn't stop. About that time, a runner come up, said, "Sergeant wanted up here to battalion CP. Mendez wants to see you." So I go up there, and he says, "I want you to take your squad down this lane where we're going to be going. There's an 88 sitting in an SS curve guarded by these German soldiers. I want you to take your squad and get down and see if you can knock that out." I said, "Sir, I only got 6 men." He says, "Well, we're all getting depleted. You give it a try." So I'm starting down through that lane, and it's all wooded area, just a narrow road, but it was like a bank here, and I'm walking along, and a sniper shot me right through the chest. Shot me through here, come out back of my shoulder blade, knocked me off the bank. I rolled down the bank, and it was just like somebody hit me with a sledgehammer. And I kind of moved a little bit, and there was a big tree right here, and he shot again and knocked the bark off above my head a couple times with a couple rounds. And I must have passed out. And finally, I come to, and there was a medic, one of our medics was there, and he was taking my boots off, my paratrooper boots off, because he thought I was dead. I had a 45 here in my side, and I told him, I said, "You might get them off, but you're never going to wear them." And he started crying. And I had nothing respect but for medics. I never envied the guys. Somebody getting wounded, they holler, "Medic," you're up there in the fire. But he wanted my boots, because he started crying. I thought you were dead. Because I was blood all over and bleeding on my mouth. And since it was so cold, I figured it was the only thing that saved my life. Well, they had captured, the other guys had gone to, they had captured these Germans. The 2 Germans, they put me on a stretcher, carried me back to this aid station. They taped me all up, and about 6 o'clock in the evening, because I still had my watch, put me in a meat wagon, heading back to Liège to the 82nd Airborne Hospital. Now, as we're going along, there was 2 wounded Germans. There was another GI and myself, and I'm laying right behind the driver. It was a black driver, staff sergeant. I'll never forget him. And we're going along, and the stretcher has these 2 poles along them. They split collapsed. Well, the road was rough, and we just had the little slits in our headlights because of the blackout and stuff. And it was rough, and it didn't hurt, so I didn't do anything. So it went about 4 or 5 minutes, and that ambulance rolled off the side of this mountain. It went side over side down this mountainside. Turned upside down in the river. It killed everybody in that ambulance but me. I laid there that night. I was pinned in the water of the river. It was only about 3 or 4 feet deep, but it was in the ambulance, and I'm laying up in the kind of like this, and I could see my watch, but I couldn't get out. And I laid there. I didn't know what I was going to do. I tried to get out, but I'm taped in. I'm strapped in and I collapsed in, and I couldn't get out. And my arm was all bandaged up around here, around my chest. 6:30 that next morning, some GIs were walking along the top of the hill where I rolled down, and they come down, and they just seen the ambulance. They come down, they found me. It took them about half an hour, 45 minutes to get me back up to the road. They retaped me up, wouldn't give me any water to drink or anything, but they took me into Liège, got in there about 8:30 that evening. I woke up the next day about 11:30, and that was my trip home. So I then later I went into Paris. I was in a hospital there for a while. In fact, I could look out the window and see the Eiffel Tower.
Really?
That's the only time I've ever seen it, really. And then I got back to Oxford, England. Then I went to Coventry, to a base camp there. And I spent my time then from January the 31st, when the sniper shot me. Now, you see, the historians say the war ended in the Battle of Bulge on the 25th of January. But I got news for them. Captain Bill Nation, who I've got a video of, he made a video, an 8mm video of combat, and I've got that complete all the way through. He got killed on the very day, January the 31st, in combat, as the day that I got shot. So we were still fighting on the 31st, but a lot of the historians say, well, the war ended in the Ardennes on the 25th of January. Not true. So in my book, there's no fiction in that, Doug. It's exactly as I remembered it. I took 2 trips back overseas. I went into the country, the areas where I fought. In Bandy, there's a story in there, like I told these students yesterday, a story in there, the SS troops in Bandy, Belgium, took 34 of these young kids just going into college or just get on to college, shot them in the back of the head, threw them into this empty cellar and threw trash over them. And I got pictures of this because I had an interpreter with me, and I talked to the older people that remembered all this. So I got pictures and things in my book about this. Right now, they've got this, it's a memorial. They got a cavern, they got their pictures of the kids all on the wall. They got candles and flowers in there fresh every day. And it's in Bandy, Belgium. And those SS killed those 34. There was one kid that he run into this barn, run through the barn, run back and hid in a haystack. And there's only one out of that whole group of 35 others that got away. But so I've had people say, well, what do you think about the Germans today? And I said, well, it's just like me being a veteran. I can't accept the Japanese, and I can't accept the way that we were treated by the Germans because of all the men I lost. I won't buy a Japanese car. I wouldn't buy a Honda toy. I wouldn't buy I keep my Chevrolet. I stay American, and I probably will till the day I die. So it's been an interesting and very exciting time in my life. I made a promise, Doug, to whoever watched over me that if I got home, I'd spend my time working with the handicapped, senior citizen, schools, the youth, and that's what I've been doing.
Can I ask you, when I go to visit a battlefield here, Gettysburg, Antietam, there's a feeling that comes up. When you go back, when you've been back, what does that feel like to a veteran?
Well, I went back I know 2011 I went back and I went to the cemetery. Excuse me just a minute. And I went back. I went to the cemetery. And I don't know, I just had to put it this way. I was friends with the guys. That's a mistake for a sergeant anyway, to make friends and then lose them. We played, some of the guys, we played basketball on the team together. We'd go on passes together. I got pictures in the book. All them guys are gone except me. So when I go back, and we're going to go back on June the 4th this year, and they got all these things planned. I said, well, I'll tell you what. I want to see the cemetery. I want to show the kids at the church yard where I landed in the churchyard. I want to see the museum area, and I want to see Hill 95 where my guys got killed, and I didn't. And so when I go back there, no matter what they do, I know they got a lot of ceremonies. I've got people calling me, and I'm going to be staying with Jean Renaud. He's the son of the original Renaud of St. Mary Lease during the war. And he was the mayor at one time, so I'm staying at his house with him. And he's got the key to the village, you know. Yeah. So I don't know what, all I know is says, you gotta be here on June the 2nd, blah, blah, blah. You gotta be here on the June the 5th, blah, blah, blah. And it says, we're all waiting for your arrival. And I'm not going for that reason. You know, I want people to know I don't proclaim myself to be any kind of a hero or scared most of the time like anybody else. I'm a survivor though.
Right.
And I just want my kids to see the cemetery. There's over 9,000 other guys buried in that cemetery above Omaha Beach, and I know 17 of them. So.
Well, you do a lot of speaking at schools and that. What do you hope that those students take away?
Well, I was impressed yesterday. They actually they said they actually want to buy the book. And that book has got history. It's got the underground work. It got this, well, everything that's in there. And I sold, I think the time before I sold 14 books down there to them, and they want more because they're interesting. But when I talk to the kids, especially at Watkins Memorial High School, they're as quiet and attentive as anybody I ever seen. And when the thing was over, instead of jumping up when the bells ring or whatever to get and leave, they all crowded around there. They wanted to see the pictures. They wanted to ask me questions. And first one, a couple of them said, "Were you scared?" And the other one was, "Did you kill anybody?" And I looked at him. I said, "Well, my book says paratroopers do or die. You know, that's my story. But I did a lot of fighting. I was in a lot of combat. Even when I got back to my unit, I fought in a lot of combat patrols because I just didn't go out there and throw them into the mercy of the guys. If I knew I was being outmanned and everything, we'd fire. Our job was to find out on a recon where they were. To combat was to draw fire to find out what they had. So I talked to these people, to these young people, and I'm so impressed with that school. Now I went to Old Tangy Orange to talk to the senior class. So I thought I'll do a little thing a little different. I asked them, I started out, thanked them to be there, and said, now I'm going to ask you guys a few questions. Anybody in here know what a convoy is? Did anybody here know what the wolf pack was? Anybody in here know what the blitzkrieg was? I said, well, I told them the convoy was the biggest flotilla of ships grouped together, like 100 of them or whatever, protected by destroyers, everything going across the ocean. The wolf pack was the German submarines that were sinking ships 3 miles off the coast of Florida during World War II. They had these explosions and things out there, and people just thought they were tankers blowing up or something, didn't have any idea. So that was the wolf pack, and it was there until we developed that flying aircraft, that could spot them.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I asked him what the Blitzkrieg was, that's when Hitler went into Poland in September 1939, and he went in there so fast they called it the Blitzkrieg. And I explained it all to him. But as soon as the class was over, the bell rang, they scrambled it. No one's, maybe one would stop and ask you a question.
Right.
So when I went to Watkins, I didn't know what, I've been there 3 times now. And those kids were really interested. I had a lot of them come up to me and see my uncle, my granddad, were in World War II, or they were in Korea, and I would talk to them and tell them, and I thanked them and their family for supporting their country. I'll let you ask me anything else.
That's okay. Hollywood makes Saving Private Ryan and of course Band of Brothers. Have you seen those?
Yeah, and
are they?
I'm critical.
Well, you should be.
Okay, because I watched the Band of Brothers, and don't get me wrong. I'm gonna say this, and this is not to be reflect on anybody, because I admired the 101st. But when we were in Normandy and got ready to go into, or when we were in England getting ready to go into Normandy, Eisenhower went to the 101st camp. Okay, where do you think the media went?
With Eisenhower.
He didn't come to the 82nd Airborne. So Saving Private Ryan, E Company, 101st Airborne. The Band of Brothers, same way, E Company, 101st Airborne. Battle of the Bulge, E Company, 101st Airborne. And I've had people say, when they listen, I said, well, wasn't the 82nd in there? I said, let me tell you, we were in there. But when they showed this movie, they showed the 101st having tanks the first day. Think about this for a minute. The seaborne invasion never started until 6:30 in the morning. We were on the ground in there around after midnight.
Yeah.
They had tanks fighting the next day. Then in part of that, you see them all sitting out in this square in this village with their overseas cap on. But like, you never wore overseas cap in combat. You had a helmet. And they're sitting there, and the next thing you know, the Germans open up on them, and they're shooting them and everything like this. And I thought, I have nothing against the 101st, but everything that you ever see, basically, it's about the 101st. You don't see a lot of stories about the 82nd Airborne. Now, they went into Marcus Garden after the war and occupation. They went in there, and I hear all these stories. I talked to this one guy I know, and I don't respect him at all. He was with the 101st. He said, when I was there, he says, I was sitting in this hotel and I had a pellet gun, and I was shooting these girls in the butt. And he says, then I had a girl different night up, and I laid up naked up and the women, when we getting ready to make the trip over, we were sitting at this table, and the wives and things were there, and the guys were all telling their story, and he was telling all this stuff. He didn't believe in God. God wouldn't let the war go on, and he was telling about all his girlfriends he had everywhere. I looked at him funny. He said Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the worst president we ever had, and he'd have been about 8 years old. Then he made a mistake. He said the 101st Airborne was the best airborne in the world. You could have dropped a pin. I hit the desk. I said, what the hell makes you think that? Excuse me. What makes you think that? There you are. You're no better and you're no worse than what we were. And don't give me this crap. And you tell me about all this stuff you do. When the heck did you ever find time to fight? And he's the kind of a guy, went in as a private, come out as a private. This is probably something that I need to get. I know the guy's still around, and I don't want him to think, because I respect it. They were paratroopers. I respect them. I know what they done, but they weren't different. They get shot the same as we did. They get blown up the same as we did. But everything is Bastogne, like the Battle of the Bulge. Everything's 101st, and they fought hard there. Yeah, they did. I don't take anything away from that. But meanwhile, here we are at 3rd of Mont Ridge, that's where I got wounded. And we had battles you couldn't believe. We lost a lot of people, keeping the Germans away from Bastogne. but there's not much printed about the 82nd Airborne. They rode into the battle in the 2-ton trucks, sitting down, stopping villages, and was putting homes. We never left the trucks, except to maybe get in the village to relieve yourself a little bit, climb back in the trucks, and keep going. And but the ironic part about this too is I got invited to a 101st Airborne convention. They made me an honorary member of the 101st. I said, now, does this mean I have to give up my allegiance to 82nd? You can forget it. But anyway, I don't want to reflect on anything because it was the biggest team in history, Doug. Without the Air Force, without us, the artillery, without the black guys that drove to pick up the trucks to bring in supplies, the Bread Ball Express, all of us together, the Navy, if we hadn't been all together, the civilians back home who built our tanks and stuff, Merchant Marine that brought the stuff across, you realize there's over 4,000 Merchant Marine vessels that were sunk by the submarines. 4,000.
Right.
Sure, they got paid for it, but a lot of them didn't get to take advantage of that. I'm kind of getting a little windy, Doug.
Okay. Well, are you getting tired?
No,
Okay.
I'm not tired.
I'm not tired of listening. We're getting the 70th anniversary of D-Day this year. What? You know, they're going to do stuff across the seas. I don't know how much is going on here in the States about it. What would you like seen done here in the States for that?
Well, let me tell you something that confuses me. Okay, and this is not for publication. I've got...
Then let me stop it. What did you do when you came home from the war?
When I first came home, my first job was working on a filling station, pumping gas, had the old gravity-fed thing,
Right.
fixing flat tires, working in the shop, changing oil and stuff in old cars. $25 a week. I didn't get married. I got home at 45, and I didn't get married till 46. And I was still working for about $25, $27 a week. And we had we were married in 46. We had our first baby, our first child, Donnie, in 48. And I just got to the place I didn't want to stay in there. I knew everything what to do in there, but I wasn't making any money. So I went back to the Columbus Depot, the CVS there on Broad Street, and they put me in charge of the Parcel Post Department. But heck, I was only making 45 cents an hour. So I worked there for a couple of years, and I was in charge of the Parcel Post in Warehouse 10, and I was bowling in a bowling tournament, and I met Tim Heisey. He owned Heisey from Newark.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of liked me, wanted to know if I wanted a job. I said, what do you pay? He said, $75 a week. Oh, criminy, you know. That was good money.
Right.
There at the plant. So I give them notice, Scobie notice over there that I was leaving. He said, oh, you can't leave, Jake. You're doing a great job. And I said, I can't work for 45 cents an hour. I'm getting a family now. So I went to work for Heisey, personnel director down there in the factory. Worked for 5 years, and we were having trouble with the unions. We wanted they were importing the Lend-Lease. They were importing glassware in here from Italy and everything, selling the goblet for 50 cents. We were charging $2.50, you know. So the union wanted more money, and Clarence, the old man said, you know, I can't give it to you, because they were getting $4.50 an hour at that time. That was good money.
Mm-hmm.
But they wanted 50 cents more. He wouldn't do it, so they closed the factory. So I moved out of there. Then I was playing golf one day at Granville. A guy named Bob Shea had a Shell distributor he had 23 service stations around in the area, and just was a coincidence. He'd hit a golf and I'd hit a slice one, and he'd hook one. We were in there looking for a ball, and we got to laughing and talking with one another. And I went back into the building, and he was chairman of the rules committee at Granville. And when I was in there eating, he came over to me and said, "Don, would you be interested in working for me?" I was like, "Excuse me?" He said, "John, I need a bookkeeper." Well, I hadn't been a bookkeeper, but although I'd done income tax for 60 years for people. But anyway, I said, "Well, let me think about it, Bob." So he kept bugging me. When he'd see me bugging and come to work for me. So I said, "All right, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go to work for you, but you got to be a little patient with me. Let me learn what you want." Because back in those days, when gas was paid by credit card, you wrote the numbers all down, one after another, to keep track of the counts for all these 23 service stations. So I went to work for him there in Johnstown, and I worked there for about 5 years. Well, he decided one day that I was going to go into the hospital, have an operation. So I did it over a holiday, because I knew it was going to take about 4 days. And he got mad because he had made plans to go, he had a cottage up on the lake. And so when I went to the hospital and got operated on, I sent my wife down to get my pay on salary. And she went in to get it, said, "He don't have no pay coming, he's not on salary." Well, she said, "Well, he said he was, so he didn't. But if he wants his vacation pay, he can have that." So I had to take it because I needed the money. I came back to work, walked into the office in there, and I said, "Bob, I need to talk to you." I said, "I'm giving you 2 weeks notice, I'm leaving." He just shrugged it off. I bowled with him, golfed with him and everything. I said, "I'm leaving." He just shrugged it off. And the second Friday, I was in there cleaning up my desk. He says, "Come on down, go grab a cup of coffee together." And I said, "No, Bob, I'm leaving." He says, "What are you doing?" "What do you mean you're leaving?" I said, "I told you 2 weeks ago." I said, "I'm not staying with you any longer." So I went down to Agritech Steel. They hired me just like that. They went on a head accountant. They hired me, and I left. And he never did get over that. Bob didn't. He didn't think I was serious. So I can't work for somebody that don't appreciate what you do for them. And I worked hard for them. I really did. So I worked there at the Agritech Steel, and they struggled to get along. Well, Tech Rubber was going like crazy up there. So Neil Stout, who I played golf with, and I knew Hank, and I knew all, they wanted to hire me. So I went up. Now I'm making $85 a week now at Agritech. So I went up and I had an interview with Rebel. She owned the place. She told me, "Oh, this is going to be your office, beautiful office. And you're going to be in charge of the cement building, and you're going to do this and you're going to do that." And I said, "Well, how much do you pay?" And she says, "Well, we start you out at $75. I said, "But I'm making $85 now." I said, "In my family now, meanwhile, I've had 2 children, 48 and 51. Wow, whatever it was. Anyway, I said, "If you'll pay me what I'm making, I'll come to work for you." "Oh, we can't do that. We pay a nice bonus at the end of the year." And I said, "Yeah, but I can't live on waiting a whole year for a bonus and then just pay it all out." So I didn't go up. The guy from the purchasing agent then from EPCO Manufacturing heard that I was looking for a job, and he said, "Don, they're looking for a guy in the sales." So I went over, had an interview with him at 10 o'clock, stayed there till 12 o'clock, and they was asking all these questions, everything. And said, "Well, we'll let you know, Mr. Jakeway." And when I got home, my wife called, said, "The EPCO just called and said they want you to come work Monday." I wound up director of their development, director of their international sales department. Started out writing orders, taking orders, and then I went to work for who was a director of the international department. He wanted me to work for him because I got along with everybody, seemed to anyway. And then when he passed away, I became the director, and I traveled over 100 different countries selling water coolers and dehumidifiers and humidifiers. And then I retired from there, 1980. Well, Tech River heard that I was available because I worked in international work, and they were getting into international, so they wanted to hire me. So I went to work for them. I lived right in town, but
Right.
they could walk to work 5 minutes, you know. So I worked for them then for 11 and a half years. 92, retired from there. I've been retired ever since. I've been writing books, and I've been doing a lot of stuff. I even done a book for a guy here the other day from the 36th Division, Texas Division. And I named the book Courage and Beyond, and he had all these pictures. He had just wrote notes and scrambled around and had all a stack of this notes, penciled and stuff. So I took it all. I said, give that to me, and I went, I took it all, I took it up to the school, to Judy. She's a speed typist. I said, would you just type this, just the way it is, type the thing, and she typed it. Give it back to me in a stack about this like this. So I started sorting it. He came up through Italy, Naples, blah, 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 and all this. And I kept sorting it in order like that. And he came in at Marseille. He went into the Battle of the Bulge. He was a prisoner of war, so he got all this stuff. So I looked at him, I said, you got a hold of this Mark Easton, my friend over there, said, he's got nothing to write a book. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, Digital Impressions right here in town will do the book for us. Let's write the book. So I got it all separated, his initial part, and when he first went in, Italy, all the way up through there, and what he done after he got home and everything, and wrote a book called him Courage and Beyond. And this guy just went berserk. It's the whole book though about him. I mean, everything's about him. Where in this book, I just have certain parts of it that's about my stories. But so we wrote this book, and his name is Herman Zerder. He's in an assisted living home down around Marietta. And I forget now, John made me these books, and they're hardbound, and nice little book. It took me about 6 months to put this all together, made him this book and give it to him, and he sold over 300 or 400 copies already.
Wow.
And I got a copy at home, and he said, how'd you come up with the name? I said, well, you hear all this stuff. I just said, Courage and Beyond sounded like pretty good. And of course, he'd been so he's going back to Normandy with me on June the 4th.
Neat.
Now, he was never in Normandy, but he was in Marseille when they had that invasion there. They come up in the southern part of France, and then up into the Belgium, into Battle of the Bulge. And then he was a prisoner. Interesting story, but he made these notes and just had it on paper, yellow paper. He says, how'd you do that? I said, well, I knew a lot of the stuff. I knew a lot of the stuff that you put in there wasn't quite the way it should be, so we changed that, and put it in order, and he appreciated it. So that was my story of when I came home. I have 3 sons and a daughter. I've owned my own home it's a small home, because when we lived in the big home that the doctor owned, my wife had 2 heart attacks there, and the doctor says, you gotta get out of that. So we bought a small house down in the end of town, and then we've been there since 1969, and I've lived in Johnstown all my life, so I can tell you stories about Johnstown. A lot of people don't believe it. I know about the mastodon when they found it, because when I lived on Mink Street, it was mud when I was a kid. So when they started graveling the road, they come by the little old Rios, and they go into Johnstown, and behind where they found this mastodon, we get over to this gravel pit, gets gravel, come out. So I'd run out and say, all right, to town with you. I'm only about 5, 6, 7 years old, maybe. I don't remember how old I was. And the guy said, well, I know your dad makes beer. He said, you get me a bottle of your dad's beer, so you can ride in with me. So I took 6 trips that day. But when my dad got home, I didn't ride no more Rios, because his razor strap come out and you stay out of my beer. And give them guys my beer, man. What happened to my beer? And anyway, they gravelled the road, and then I was born on Miller Road, and we lived on this little 8-acre farm, and my sister still lives there.
Really? That's neat that it's still in the family.
So I've had an exciting, I've had a good life. I'm 91 years old, and I can't play golf anymore because I had a stroke in 2009. And my balance is off, and I won't go out and try and make a fool of myself. So I used to be a pretty good golfer,
right.
and so I don't do that, and I can't bowl anymore. But I shelled out my driveway for snow. I drive. I go around. I was just down to the Boeing company down in Newark. I had a big talk down there. It's great. They had 400 and some veterans working there.
That's good.
So I go around to Rotary clubs, churches. I go to homeschools. I go to schools and stuff like that. And I get invited to all these different places, and I get a kick. And I don't charge anybody anything for doing it. The other guys, they charge.
Oh yeah.
So all I do is I wrote my book. I said, if you're interested in my book, it's $30, I said it does help my gas bill. So I talked to the Rotary Club down at Newark under Stu Parsons. Then I sold quite a few books there. So when I wrote this book, Doug, I took it down, I got it done, went down to Alden's, down to the bookstore, and I said, they'd be interested in selling it for me. And he looked at it and said, well, there's not much interest in something like this. And besides, I had to have 65% of the profits. And I told him where he could go, and I just sold one of my home.
How many have you sold, do you
A
think?
little over 4,000, probably, maybe more. I just have 50 made at a time, and I don't make any money on them, not really. Making 50 at a time, I'll make $5, $10.
Right.
But I got to make something.
Right.
But I put this together to get this thing out. When you look at this thing, when you go to look at this thing, it's historical.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I flipped through it. I mean, and there's the pictures and everything. I mean, there's a lot of information.
Well, there is, and I took a lot of time when I was overseas, and I picked out the stuff that I wanted to be in there because I knew that throughout the lieutenant from the 2nd platoon, kept a diary, and we weren't allowed to do that. 16-page diary in there that he wrote.
When did you write this?
I started in it. I finished it it took me 9 years, and I published it in 1992. And I don't advertise a lot on it, but when I go to these speaking engagements, I take it along, and then I just got back from that big military show down in Louisville, Kentucky, and I take my books down there and the tapes and the pictures and the prints and things and sell those. And then I've been putting that together to make my trip to take. My airfare for my son was $1,800 a piece.
Wow.
Think of that. The last trip I went over there in 1992, the airfare was $668. I still got that. But it's $1,800 a piece on this trip.
Wow.
So you see what you get invested for. There's 4 of us.
Mm-hmm. So
I had to raise money some way. So the big print, see, this is a copy, but I got the big prints. They're about the size of that window there, the big prints. And it's signed by Matt Hall, signed by Bert Jacobs, and signed by me. These I signed, I kind of messed it up a little bit, but it's still on there a little bit. The pen went bad on me, but I signed it in the corner a little bit. Anyway, the Bert and Matt, and we sold these things the prints for $175 a piece, and then went to Ken Grimes out here, a professional framer, and so we got $300 with it framed.
That's wonderful.
But it cost us $6,000 to get the original done too. So it did a lot of work. So I sold, it's a limited edition, it won't make any more. So we had 50 of those sold. Then we made, I got some that Matt Hall drew of the plane I jumped from in Normandy, flying over St. Mary-Glees area. Then I got I got two from St. Mary-Glees, Normandy. Then I got a big 5-foot one from the one in Holland showing the plane I jumped from was on fire. I got that one on the wall, and then I got the one from the Ardennes with some of the 101st guys. And then over here he's got these drawn at the ghost of the guys that were killed there. So they're amazing prints, and they're all limited edition. They make no more of them.
Right.
So I made up a few of these. I'm just giving them to guys like you. So there's a history here because that family lived in only half of this.
Half of the attic.
Half of this attic. There's 5 of them. There's a picture. There they are right there. That family lived in there. They wore the same clothes. They eat turnips and potatoes. Sometimes they had dry oatmeal and water that these people would, because they couldn't go buy anything, go to Germany and get suspicious. They had made, there was a barn behind this because they had cattle barn, and they had their facilities would be down through the hay mile into the trenches behind the cattle. You know, like, and can you believe this thing, talking to birds, in the 25 months that they were in there, they never had one health problem. I said, not a cold? She says, Donald, he says, we eat them, I must have eaten them turnips and the onions and things that we eat, and we didn't have no toothpaste. We wore the same clothes, because once in a while they would bring in maybe some oatmeal or something, but we lived on potatoes and onions. Most of the time we were there. He said, I can't stand to eat a potato or an onion anymore, but he loves pizza. Oh, Bert loves pizza. So we had him out here, and this tells the whole story about it, and it's
we'll make sure
it's very, very interesting because this was Rosa. I think that was Rosa. Yeah. And then this is the guy that was killed, was laying in that doorway on that.
Okay.
And then this is Jakeway that died underneath me at that. And then this is Bert and his sister. And this is what the family looked like. And there should be another one here. Yeah. This is what Bert looked like, because he moved to the United States in the 50s. Became a distributor of Pontiac in California. That's how we found him. These are 3 men out of my squad. We just knocked out this Pantherhausen bazookas. Mm-hmm. This Neff, Zebra, and Muffley out of my squad, fighting there in Beak. And then
did they survive the war?
Yep. I don't know what happened to Neff. But Muffley survived the war, and Zebra did, and they've because they're all gone now. There's only 4 of us left out of the company.
Yeah.
And then this is a story about the artist, and this was Bert when he came out here, and we went around to the different schools to talk. And I pinned a set of wings on him, made him an honorary Airborne guy. He had tears in his eye, very emotional man. But I thought maybe you might be interested in those. So.
Well, and I appreciate that, and we'll make sure we add that to your file so that not only I can see it, but that others.
The only thing that I don't want to be in any of be critical of the 101st and the guys.
Sure.
My opinion, I think it was wrong that the way Eisenhower done it, so I'm ticked off at him. He had plenty of time, because he did that in the morning. He could have come to our outfit in the afternoon, because we didn't jump until that night. But everything after that, because the news media followed that, everything then is 101st. 101st didn't win the war. Right. They helped.
Right.
And we were in there actually, like in the Ardennes, we were in there fighting before they were. But they went into the Bastogne area, set up into that area, and that's where they fought, in this area around Bastogne, not just in the city.
Right. Well, like you said, they had the press with them.
Yeah, that's it. Well, naturally. So everything had to do with Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers, and the Battle of the Bulge, and these things. Everything is about. It was E Company of the 101st Airborne, and I said, I'm sorry, I just don't understand, because we were in there fighting like crazy. We lost a lot of people out of our regiment in the Ardennes, fighting to keep them away from Bastogne. So McAuliffe said nuts, and that made history.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Don, I appreciate you taking this time to sit down and let me.
Well, you can see
this.
I get pretty windy, because I tell you what, I do get a lot of speaking engagements, and I never, when I go to schools, I never talk about the fight. I talk about the basic training, getting ready for it, my jumps, training in the swamps, taking compass reading at night and crawling over things that look like logs or alligators or snakes in there and stuff, and taking your crew through there, learning all this stuff and using flamethrower and learning how. And I talk to them. I be very careful when I talk about the colored boy, because that taught me quite a lesson. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, it did. So I hesitate a lot of times to talk about this in the schools, because I don't want the young people, the young black people, to think I'm trying to make a big deal out of it, but it was something that I learned, and I learned it from that young kid. He could have never come back.
Right. I mean, that's a good lesson. I mean,
and when I gave him that 50-cent piece, he was running down that road. It's probably the most money he'd seen ever since he'd been a kid. Well, it's been my pleasure.